They cut me off for 4 years. Then they walked in with lawyers to take half my company. What they didn't know, I had a secret weapon. The words on the papers are like a punch to the gut. I stare at them, my hand trembling just slightly as I hold the legal documents in front of me. My parents, George and Linda, haven't said a word to me in years, and now, out of nowhere, they've sent a team of high-powered lawyers to demand half of everything I've worked for. The family that turned their back on me is suddenly at my door, knocking with a vengeance. The shock is almost too much to process, but the one thought that keeps repeating in my head is simple. How did they find me? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. 4 years ago, I walked away from everything to build something of my own. Sophie Matthews, 27, entrepreneur and founder of my tech startup. When I made that decision, I didn't just choose my career, I chose myself. But my family? They couldn't understand. Their world was all about traditional success, staying close-knit, running the family business, living by their rules. And when I couldn't conform, they disowned me. I thought it was over. The last time I saw my parents was an argument that turned into a complete emotional severing. "You'll regret this," my dad George said, his voice low and full of anger. I'd never forget the sting of that moment, the words that made it clear. My path had to align with their vision, or I was out. And I walked out. Over the years, I had learned to live with the silence, the loneliness. But now, after building this company from the ground up, I had no idea why they were coming back into my life, especially like this. This wasn't a simple, let's talk situation. This was a legal war. As I sit in my office, the weight of the papers in my hands, I know one thing. This isn't just about the money or the company. It's about proving to them, and to myself, that I made the right choice all those years ago. The question isn't whether I'll fight back, it's how. I take a deep breath and think of the one thing they won't expect. What's the secret weapon I have? But what is it? The answer isn't clear yet, but it's coming. And soon, I'll have to face the consequences of this battle head-on. I never thought I'd see my parents again. But now, standing here in my office, staring down at the legal papers, the gravity of the situation hits me like a brick wall. The last time they spoke to me was when they disowned me, throwing me out of the family business. And now, they've come back, guns blazing, trying to take everything I've worked for. What changed? Why now? The first few years without them felt like freedom. After leaving home, I threw myself into building my startup, pouring every ounce of energy into it. I didn't have their backing, no trust fund, no cushy job offer. It was just me and my determination. I remember the sleepless nights, the constant hustle to make ends meet, and that relentless drive that told me I couldn't fail. I knew the risks, the sacrifices, but I did it because I had to. For once, I was in control. The startup became my baby, and my idea, a new tech app that could revolutionize how people communicate, quickly turned into something big. Investors noticed, and slowly but surely, it all started falling into place. And then, a few weeks ago, the phone call came. At first, I thought it was a prank. The lawyer introduced himself as representing my parents, and my stomach dropped. They were demanding a share of my company, 50% to be exact. The lawyer, Elliot Carter, an imposing man in his late 40s, spoke with authority. "This is a legal matter. Your parents are entitled to 50% of the company as per the will of your late grandfather." I could barely breathe as he continued, reading off some convoluted legal jargon. Entitled? My parents had cut me off years ago, And now they thought they could just waltz back in and claim what I built? I didn't know what to do. I'd had no idea about any will or any legal standing they might have had. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. It was about them thinking they could just show up and take whatever they wanted because they were family. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let them take everything I'd worked for. Not again. There had to be something I was missing. A legal loophole, a mistake on their part, something that could turn the tide in my favor. I decided I needed to get to the bottom of it, and fast. But the clock was ticking, and if I didn't act quickly, they might just take what was mine. So I started digging, looking through every document, contract, and old file I could find. That's when I came across something that stopped me dead in my tracks. A document that could change everything. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges. It looked almost insignificant at first, just another contract buried in a pile of dusty files. But when I saw the words inheritance clause, my heart skipped a beat. I froze, rereading the document over and over, my mind racing. Could this really be it? Could this piece of paper actually hold the key to saving everything? The document was from my late grandfather's will, something I hadn't even thought about in years. He left a substantial portion of his wealth to my parents and the family business, but there was a clause that I had never seen before. It was a provision that granted me full control of any future ventures I created, overriding anything my parents might claim over them. This was it, the loophole that could change everything. I knew my parents were blind to this clause. After all, they had always assumed that once I left the family business, I would be nothing. But this clause stated that any business I started would remain mine, and theirs would have no legal claim over it. But here's the thing. My parents had lawyers, powerful ones. They weren't going to back down just because I had a piece of paper. I needed more than just this document. I needed to be strategic. I called my lawyer, Ramon Alvarez, who'd been helping me navigate the early stages of the company's legal setup. Ramon was sharp, and he immediately saw the value in this clause. But even he was cautious. Sophie, this could be huge, but don't underestimate your parents. They'll fight this, and they'll fight dirty, he warned. I felt the weight of his words. What if this wasn't enough? What if my parents had something else up their sleeve? And what about the emotional side of all this? After 4 years of silence, they hadn't even tried to reach out, until now. Was this just about the company, or was there something deeper at play? Were they using the company to punish me for leaving them? The fear started creeping in, but I couldn't back down now. I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much. My company was my life now, and I wasn't going to let them take it away without a fight. Ramon and I worked late into the night, preparing a strategy. I had to confront my parents, face to face. Tomorrow, I would meet them in court. And if this clause was the weapon I hoped it was, I would use it to defend everything I had worked for. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. What would happen when I showed them the document? Would they back down? Or would they fight harder than I ever expected? The courtroom felt cold, almost suffocating. My heart raced as I took my seat across from my parents. I hadn't seen them in 4 years, and now here they were, sitting just a few feet away, the same smug, self-assured look on their faces. They thought they were going to win this. They thought I was too weak to fight back. But today was different. As I sat there, my parents' lawyers, sharp-dressed and serious, went over the numbers. They presented evidence of the supposed entitlement my parents had over the company, citing legal jargon about business inheritance and my grandfather's will. but none of it felt right. I could feel the weight of their claims in the room, but in my gut, I knew they were bluffing. Their lawyer, Elliot Carter, gave me a condescending smile. "We both know how this ends, Ms. Matthews," he said, leaning forward. "You can't fight us. Your parents have every right to claim half of this company. It's written in the law." I felt a surge of anger rise in me. I wasn't about to back down to a man who didn't even know what he was talking about. I glanced over at my parents. They sat together, silent, staring at me with disdain. George's cold eyes made me feel like I was 5 years old again, being scolded for not following his plans. I could almost hear him in my head. "You'll never make it without us." But that was the past. This was my moment, my chance to stand up and take back what was rightfully mine. I stood up, my hand slightly shaking, but my voice firm. "I have something to show you," I said, meeting my parents' eyes. I turned to my lawyer, Ramon, who handed me the document, the very one that could end this. I held it up, the paper trembling between my fingers. The room fell silent. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My parents' lawyers shot nervous glances at each other, and even George and Linda seemed uncertain for a brief moment. I could see their expressions falter as they realized something had changed. Ramon smiled, knowing exactly what was coming. "Sophie, go ahead," he said quietly. With a deep breath, I slid the document across the table. It was the inheritance clause from my grandfather's will, the clause that meant they had no legal claim to my company. As I watched their reactions, I knew the game had just changed. But would they give up, or would they fight back with everything they had? This was the moment that would decide everything. The room was silent as my parents' lawyer read through the inheritance clause. The expression on his face shifted from confident to uncertain, and the cold, calculating demeanor my parents had maintained up until now began to crack. I could almost feel the weight of their shock, their realization that the tables had just turned. The clause clearly stated that I had sole control over any business I started, with no right for my parents or their estate to claim any ownership. The legal precedent was solid, the wording unambiguous. It was a clause my parents had completely missed when they first tried to make their claim, and now it was the very thing that would save my company. Elliot Carter, who had been so sure of himself moments ago, now glanced up from the paper, looking unsure of how to respond. He finally stammered, This wasn't mentioned in any of the previous legal filings." He looked at my parents, who exchanged a quick, silent glance. Their faces drained of colour. I could see the realization in their eyes. They thought they had me cornered, thought they could take control of everything I had built. But they had underestimated me. They had underestimated the one thing they never counted on: my independence. And now, they were paying for it. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight that had been hanging over me for weeks suddenly felt lighter. It was as though a cloud had lifted, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from their expectations, free from their control, and free to keep the company I had built from the ground up. For a moment, I could see the pain in my parents' eyes, but there was no time for sympathy. This wasn't about forgiveness or family. It was about survival. They had left me behind when I needed them the most, and now it was my turn to stand my ground. The lawyer's voice trailed off as he realized there was no way out of this for them. My parents had no claim, no leverage. They had overplayed their hand, and now the consequences were clear. The legal battle was effectively over. My company was safe, and I had just won a battle I hadn't even expected to fight. But the fallout from this moment was far from over. My parents, now exposed, would have to deal with the public and family backlash. Their attempt to take control of my company had destroyed whatever fragile relationship we might have had left. It was a bitter victory, and the emotional toll on me was deep. I had protected my company, but at the cost of any potential reconciliation with my family. As I left the courtroom, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But it wasn't the relief I had imagined. There was no elation, no celebration, just the calm realization that I had survived. My company was mine to keep. But the truth was, this battle had taken more from me than I was ready to admit. I walked out into the sunlight, Ramon by my side. The city felt different today, brighter somehow. But I knew that the hardest part wasn't over. I had won, yes, but I had lost my family in the process. Looking out at the horizon, I knew one thing for sure. I was stronger than I had ever been. I was ready for whatever came next, and no matter what, I wasn't going to let anything take my future from me.